Pozdravljeni, moje ime je Gregor Kovač, prihajam iz družbe V&D Zlato, vašega zaupanja vrednega partnerja pri nakupu in prodaji plemenitih kovin. Pred nami je en zelo zanimiv ali pa izjemno kvaliteten dokumentarni film avtorja Davida Morgana, ki ga zelo cenim in spoštujem kot finančnega strokovnjaka, pa tudi nasplošno kot človeka. Film zelo dobro prikaže, kako deluje trenutni finančni sistem, kakšna je vloga denarja v družbi, katere so nevarnosti tega sistema za družbo, kaj nam še pripravljajo in na koncu tudi kakšna je alternativna vizija, kakšen je pošten denarni sistem. Če si boste pogledali ta dokumentarni film, vam bo bistveno bolj jasno, kaj je treba storiti, da se zaščitimo pred velikimi nevarnostmi obstoječega plana vladajoče elite. Uživajte.
Let's face it, we all feel it, the stress, fear, and control that comes with money. But we also love money. After all, it's an essential part of our lives. We use money to not only pay taxes and bills, but to buy the joyful experiences of life. Unfortunately, many feel overwhelmed by even the thought of money, often a love-hate relationship. We try not to care, but stress is in the air. There is never enough, or someone has too much. The neighbors always have new cars. One has a swimming pool. The kids need shoes, but college is $50,000 a year. Yes, the stress of money is always in the air. The constant fear of losing it. There is never enough. A stock market crash or robbery. Scarcity. But deep down, we know scarcity is artificial. Given the apparent size of the universe, we know intuitively that the scarcity of money, as a form of energy, must also be an illusion. If so, how is money manipulated to seem scarce? Are we too stressed out to even contemplate questions like this, let alone solve them? Let's take a closer look at the subject of money and try to arrive at some solutions to remedy the stress, fear, and control it often generates.
The energy needs to correlate directly with the money, so the money needs to be honest. If the money is changing arbitrarily, it's no longer a direct connection to the energy. If we do have honest money, and if people are free to act by their own will, as long as they're not violating anyone else, then there will be plenty of money and plenty of energy to go around.
And I think it'd be a great idea if the government issued money that was backed by gold and silver, which means that for every unit of paper that they issue, like a little contract, a warehouse receipt, you take in this receipt and we'll give you 1 ounce of 999% pure gold or silver, whatever value or purity they want to put on there. Throughout all of history, no exceptions, all the governments that have backed their money by gold and silver later changed their mind.
Academics define money as a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a tally of production. By medium of exchange, we mean money stands in for actual products and services when people want to exchange them. This exchange is known as trade. By store of value, we mean money has and keeps value equal to the value of the products and services it represents.
So money is a tool that can be used for good and evil, just like your hand can be used lots of different ways. A knife can be used lots of different ways. Your car can be a fantastic convenience in life, or it can be very dangerous if mishandled. And it's the same thing with money.
Real money is honest. Gold, silver, and 100% redeemable paper are honest money, therefore not the source of stress, fear, or control. Real money allows us to acquire material possessions without debt, as debt-based currency doesn't work in the long term. Debt-based currency dictates we sell our souls short-term to satisfy our lust and greed long-term.
So we have accepted the notion that our government is supposed to police the world, run our personal lives, and protect us from ourselves, and to be a central economic planner through monetary policy. And it leads to a monster-sized government, and the suffering goes to the people, and today we see the wiping out of the middle class and so many people unhappy.
With so much corruption in the monetary system and the financial elite losing power, a new economic model will be introduced. And this is called the CBDC, short for Central Bank Digital Currency. Advocates for CBDC argue that such a global currency would provide a unified approach to addressing many of society's issues.
Sounds wonderful on the surface. It's going to be everywhere, and it's going to be so easy to do transactions, and we're going to be able to keep a complete record of everything. Seems like it's got a lot going for it. However, it's the next giant trick. It is fiat money on steroids.
Central bank digital currency is a mechanism to basically eliminate cash, so a cashless society, and everything is done digitally, and you have access to it only through their rails. In other words, through your iPhone or through your computer, and that's the only way you can transact. It takes away a lot of freedom. It takes away all anonymity, and every transaction could be traced, taxed, tracked at the point of sale. And on top of that, the mechanism exists where you could actually control what someone could buy or sell.
Once a government maintains 100% power over the ability of someone to purchase items or services in a digital capacity, they are going to completely shut down people's ability to buy and sell services if the person does anything that the government deems unsatisfactory according to the government's desires, wishes, commands, and worldview.
The banks could theoretically cut off at any time the use of a person's account for whatever reasons politically might be advantageous. The governments could step in, or world governmental entities such as UN might step in and be able to do that and say certain things could not be purchased internationally or even domestically. And so the financial system then would also be subject to complete surveillance. Now, there's a lot of surveillance that already goes on within the American banking system, but we're talking about every transaction that would be subject to surveillance.
If you do anything that they don't like, they'll just turn the switch and you don't have any digital money anymore. You can't even buy a glass of water, and you can't even go sit on the street with a tin cup saying, "Give me some money because I'm broke," because nobody has anything to put in your tin cup. It's all digital money.
Or they could, if they thought we were eating too much meat, they could limit the amount of meat that our account would work for, or our credit card, debit card. The government could do that anyway, because they did it with the truckers in Canada, where they actually cut off the donations to the truckers who were doing something that obviously the government didn't approve of, but it would just be easier to do with the central bank digital currency, easier to control. I've heard people say, like, they try to pull $10,000 out of the bank or whatever, and the bank will say, "Well, what do you want to spend it on?" Well, it's really not any of their business. It's your money, you put it in there, you should be able to get it out.
But on CBDC, you're in ultimate form of control. Of course, it's the banker's delight, is to say, no, you can't fill up your car this month, you've already driven enough miles. Your carbon footprint that's tied to the CBDC has already gone to your limit. You're going to either have to walk there or not carry on that trip.
Actually, we already have in the United States central bank digital currency, because a vast number of transactions involving the Federal Reserve System do not involve actual transfers of paper money from one person to another. They're effectuated by credit cards. Let's take that as an example. Debit cards, another example. All of those transactions are completely electronic and digits take place within the banking system, crediting one person and debiting another person's account. And so if you look at it that way, from the way the system actually works now, probably the vast majority of transactions that occur are already digital transactions. What most people talk about now in terms of digital central bank currencies is some sort of international or global system. It might involve more than one central bank, it might involve one world central bank, all sorts of theories and prognostications of what's going to happen. Theoretically, that would not be terribly different from what we have now, except there probably would not be some sort of paper currency or coinage in which those digits could be transformed for people to make transactions from one to another, hand to hand. And that's where the problem arises, because at that point, that banking system now controls completely the financial life of the individuals that are involved in the marketplace.
How much entertainment you use, how much clothing you bought, where you ate, what you ate. But on CBDC, you're in the ultimate form of control.
Initiatives like Agenda 21, aimed at sustainable development, emphasize the need for collective action to ensure the well-being of future generations. Advocates believe a global monetary system could facilitate such initiatives.
In the real world, tyrants don't come out and say, I want to rule the world. That's for comic books and movies and stuff. In the real world, tyrants come out and say, I want to save the world. I want to fix the world. I want to serve you. I want to give you free stuff. I want to do all these lovely things for you if you'll just give me the power. And it's the people who say that you should be scared to death of. Because it's the people who say that who are not there to help you. They are not there to serve you. They are not there to fix society. They are there to dominate and control and extort you and treat you as their slave.
We've got to stop it. Well, how do we stop it? We don't overthink it. We have to, first of all, get those politicians out of office who have been supporting it all this time.
The system that we've had, whether it's the schools or the movies or the news or the books and all, it all teaches us to conform and not to act out of step. Instead of encouraging individualism, they encourage collectivism. They teach people that rights come in groups.
In 1694, the King of England needed money. He was fighting a war with France. And so this group of financiers got together, formed what was called the Bank of England, and they lent him the money to fight the war. And the deal was he never had to pay the money back. He just had to keep paying interest year after year after year. And that's pretty much the system we still have, where we've got this debt that just keeps going up, and we don't ever pay it off. We just keep paying the interest.
The central banks right now, for example, the 6 major banks in New York are over $600 trillion in debt through their derivatives, which are just financial scams, taking simple money and making it very complicated and benefiting until people figure it out. But meanwhile, they just run up these giant bills. They'll never be able to pay that back. They're basically broke, and they can't afford to have that come out to the public, or they're going to lose their power. So they're rushing as fast as they can to move from cash, from honest securities and so forth, to central bank digital currency, because that will allow them to start fresh. Now, the first thing they'll do is print a whole bunch of money, digital money for themselves. And that way they get to throw the monopoly board up in the air because they've lost the game. And then when things come back down, they'll be completely in charge, and they'll use the CBDCs to control everybody's life.
A central bank is basically either private or public. It's an establishment or a bank that basically controls the money supply. It's really that simple. And of course it goes through the banking system from your local bank to regional bank to state bank in some cases, but mostly to a federal national bank, and that's under the Federal Reserve System, and the Federal Reserve System's under the Bank of International Settlements. And it goes on and on. So the world really is run by the banking system. I mean, I've made that argument over and over, and I believe it's probably the most accurate as far as how the world really works. It runs on energy. Energy is by far the most important. But as far as how do people transact, why are they stressed out, why do they run on fear, and how are they controlled, it comes down to the banks.
The current monetary system tends to render people debt slaves who fall into the trap of using debt primarily as a means of enjoyment or to purchase things, services, and goods that are enjoyable and for their pleasure, but not necessarily necessary or for something constructive. So they go into debt for fun, in other words, instead of productivity.
A global monetary system that just offers advantages to the elites would be risky for the rest of the world's citizens. Citizens need to be in control of their monetary system, as it's connected to our own spiritual energy. This also means that citizens need to be in control of their energy sources. Since money and energy are two sides of the same coin, this means control of money is control of energy and vice versa. Money is a tally of the products and services created by a civilization. In Austrian economics, it warned us that money is also a means by which banking and corporate elites extract unjust wealth from people's labor. They tell us money can provide a covert means by which governments finance perpetual wars. Currently, we operate within Keynesian economics.
Well, you know, the difference between Keynesianism and Austrian economics is fascinating. In Keynesian economics is nothing but baloney. And they think if they put some figures into a computer and make some unbelievably complex, ridiculous calculation, they can predict the future, and they've never been right.
They tell us money can facilitate an expanding police and surveillance state. Yes, money affects us on a personal level, but it also produces stress, fear, and anxiety for the world in general. After all, why do millions starve on street corners and in dirt villages while CEOs in glass skyscrapers take home 400 times the base pay of their stressed-out workers?
My opinion is that money should not be backed by gold and silver. It should be gold and silver. That is money. That is the ultimate money. It's something of intrinsic value. Gold and silver have always served that function in history.
Honest money is essentially what the adjective tells us, that whatever this money purports to be, it actually is. You think of counterfeit money, paper money that has been generated by some clever counterfeiter. You think of counterfeit gold or silver coins where the disc itself is made of tungsten or lead and then a gold or a silver veneer is now put on it. Obviously the dishonesty is involved in that process. If you think about it in a larger sense, where government is turning out money through its treasury and it claims that this money is an ounce of gold in a coin, ounce of silver, what have you, but the government is actually debasing that coin. There's not an ounce of gold in the coin. There's not an ounce of silver. There's only 90% of an ounce, and the rest of it is lead or some other metal that's been mixed with the gold. So dishonesty can occur in many ways, the typical counterfeiter, or perhaps the dishonest government treasury.
There's a gentleman named Harold Katz-Vella that speaks around the world. He's famous for speaking at this bases gathering, and he talks about, money and what its purpose is and how it's utilized and what it means. And he talks about this experiment. And in this experiment, they teach apes how to use money. And from memory, it took them a few weeks, I think 3 weeks, and the community of apes knew how money worked. And when they started doing transactions, they found out very early that the societal structure started to break down.
They tried to teach apes to use money. It took 3 days, they knew how it works. After 3 weeks, the boys in the ape family started to steal and betray, and the girls started to prostitute themselves. And after 6 weeks, the biologists who run the project decided to stop the project because they could see the social patterns fall to bits and pieces, getting self-destructive and ugly. And then they decided to take the money away again. Big mistake. The apes were not willing to let go of this. They were beating the biologists up when they tried to get the money back. And this is gaming addiction. And every single human who is part of economy has fallen to this gaming addiction. And the core of this gaming addiction is scarcity. We think we don't have enough. This is why we grab as much as we can. This is what creates the idea of money and the idea to possess things. This is not nature. This is a demonic program to bring us into self-destructive patterns. Look at the Red Indians in America, at the native tribes. They don't have money, they have love. If they do something, they do it out of the original reason to do things. If we do something, we do it for cash. And we are so in scarcity that we do everything for cash. Look at the Hollywood productions. Look at the mercenary killing millions of people. Yeah, a job. Yeah. We have to do the job. Yeah? This is where money brings us to. And the moment when you have these two options of transmuting every element you need and producing energy as much as you need, we enter a world of abundance. And this can only work if also the psychology of the scarcity is leaving. If we let go of this and start to trust the other cycle of, I know that there's enough of everybody. This is why I let go everything I don't need in this moment and share it with other people. And they gain trust in the thought that there really is enough for everybody. And this is also self-strengthening. And at the moment we are kind of diving through the hole of the needle, leaving one system, entering the other one. It's a process that is going to take place during the next 3 to 5 years. And when we are through, nothing is going to be the same on this planet.
And what he talks about is it boiled down to gaming addiction. You know, stuff we've talked about, you know, never having enough or not feeling like you have enough. And he talks about the scarcity idea, this fear that we have, that we don't have enough or that we are not enough. And that we're not enough, and because we're not enough, we need something external to ourselves to be enough. And if we get enough, we'll be enough. And some people can never get enough because they'll never be enough. They'll never be self-actualized, or whatever you want to refer to it as being content in and of yourself, where you can be your authentic being.
Central banks can theoretically issue a currency called central bank digital currency. Right now, the currency that the central bank does issue is reserves.
When Congress wants to spend without further taxing, it borrows. It borrows by issuing IOUs known as Treasury bills, Treasury notes, and Treasury bonds. These debt instruments are then offered to individuals, large corporations, and governments, domestic and foreign. When no one has the money to buy any more debt, the Federal Reserve buys it. Where does the Fed get the money? It literally prints it out of thin air. This so-called currency is then labeled Federal Reserve notes, and Congress now has more money for yet another war. This process, known as monetizing debt, causes inflation of the monetary base. Thus, when there are more Federal Reserve notes than products in circulation, prices rise because the government banking cartel has created too much new money, diluting the money already in circulation.
The Federal Reserve, which is actually a private organization, it's not federal, and it has very little reserves, is an organization which has been given the authority to create or to take back money out of the supply. And when they put more and more money into the economy that is not backed by actual value, what it does is create an artificial boom.
Well, the Federal Reserve is a creature of Congress. It was created by Congress in 1913 and given all sorts of banking powers and currency powers. And the interaction between Congress and the Treasury Department, which is in the executive branch, and the Federal Reserve is fairly complicated, but it really boils down to this. Congress comes up with some spending program and says we need to borrow so much money in order to finance this program. The Treasury then emits bonds to that amount of money, takes those bonds to the Federal Reserve regional banks. The banks buy the bonds, or perhaps commercial banks within the Federal Reserve System buy the bonds, and they create a deposit to the amount of the bond in the Treasury's account. So what's happened? The Treasury has handed this asset, that is the bond, to the bank. It's an asset to the bank because the bank can collect on it. It's a debt of the Treasury. The bank then creates money which the government can then spend on some program or other activity. So the banks are really providing the money for the government to spend on the basis of the debt that Congress allows the Treasury to incur. And the question then arises, why do you need the debt?
And right now, the Federal Reserve is acting against the interests of the Treasury. Like the Treasury has a nearly $35 trillion debt. They're paying $1 trillion in interest. We're up to $1 trillion a year. So clearly they would like to be able to have the Fed buy that debt. But the Fed not only is not buying debt, they're selling debt.
So the whole system is a debt-based monetary system. And the debt-based system is based on the government borrowing from a private bank, the Federal Reserve. Bonds are issued through the Treasury. They're out in the open market, so an individual can buy them, banks can buy them, brokerage houses, etc. So the interest on those bonds are payable to the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve basically prints these bonds at face value. They also print the currency at face value, but they pay the actual cost of production. If they make a $100 bill or a $5 bill cost the same, let's call it a nickel. So they buy that from the Treasury for 5 cents, but they loan it out to the federal government that borrows from them at face value plus interest. It's the same thing in the bond market. They can make a $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, $10 million bond, and the face value is what the banker pays, or the individual or the corporation, at that amount plus interest.
Quite a few years ago, when the United States was much more dominant in the world financial system than it is today, the determination was made that oil, petro products, oil coming out of the ground, was to be valued and priced in dollars. So if someone wanted to buy significant quantities of oil, say from one of the Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, whatever it would be, that oil would be priced in dollars, so many dollars per barrel typically, and then that would be the medium of payment. Now this was very valuable to the Federal Reserve System because here was this huge market for oil all over the world in which people needed to have Federal Reserve currency, or actually bank deposits that were payable in Federal Reserve currency, in order to buy and engage in transactions in raw petroleum.
The Federal Reserve has gotten the blame for boom and bust cycles when they manipulate the currency, when they manipulate the amount of currency in circulation. And they do that typically, they have two key tools. One is to raise or lower the interest rate, and the other is quantitative easing, where they're putting all these extra reserves out in the system. The idea of lowering the interest rate is to stimulate the economy, because more people then borrow, and of course 95% of our money supply comes from banks when they create loans. So if more people are borrowing, that means they've got more money in their pocket, and they go out and they buy stuff, business booms, etc. So then you have a boom. Typically when prices get too high, the Federal Reserve wants to cut inflation, and the way they do that then is to raise the interest rate, which makes it more difficult for people and businesses to borrow, which means there's less money circulating in the economy. And then if it's very sudden, it can crash.
We've been fooled into allowing them to create a debt-based economy. And that means that for every dollar that comes into existence, in the United States, for instance, it's being loaned into existence by the banks. And then they're going to be collecting interest on that loaned money, either from individuals or from the government, from taxes and so forth. And they'll never print enough money to pay that interest. So all of society is thrown into that very crisis that I was describing for the individual. And that's why the government gets together every 6 months or so and makes a show out of worrying about increasing the debt ceiling. And they go, okay, well, we'll do it.
It's kind of a sleight of hand, because the Federal Reserve System is actually a creature of Congress to begin with. So Congress is coming from itself. It's a creature of the Constitution, going another creature to generate money through this interesting borrowing system, as opposed to going directly to some local bank, ma and pa bank in small town USA. Now, what's even more interesting is you ask the question, why is this necessary? If the government can do this through a banking system that is created, where the bank takes the government debt and then produces government-sponsored currency, why doesn't the Treasury simply print the currency itself and save the interest on the debt? And it's very interesting to me that nobody asked that question. What is the actual purpose of the Federal Reserve System in relationship to the government of the United States, when all it is doing is turning government debt into currency? Why do we need the middleman?
So the more debt that you create, the more currency you could produce, which means as these bonds are negotiated or sold back, then you keep increasing the money supply. You're creating something from nothing. I mean, yeah, paper and ink, but basically nothing. So you're creating quote unquote wealth with a printing press, be it currency or a bond certificate. And then at the end, you can never pay the interest back. So it's a debt cycle that never ends until it ends.
And that's one reason that the Federal Reserve System now may be facing a certain danger, that there is a tendency in the world to want to change the petrodollar system to some other monetary unit. If that happened, the value of Federal Reserve notes would rapidly decline, because this huge market for their use, that is the petroleum trade throughout the world, would no longer be dependent upon the Federal Reserve note. It could use some other currency. The Federal Reserve currency is printed where? It's printed in the Bureau of Printing and Engraving. It's printed by the Treasury. So if you look at this, it really seems to be a very strange situation, that the Treasury can print the money to give to the Federal Reserve, so the Federal Reserve can buy the bonds of the Treasury, so the Treasury can take the money to spend, but the Treasury, Congress does not give the Treasury the power simply to print the money itself and then spend it directly without the involvement of the banking system at all. It's Alice in Wonderland.
The national debt is so horrendous, the only solution may be a debt jubilee. Given the liabilities, we should stay away from debt, as a nation and as individuals. We should cut our credit cards in half. We should only borrow to purchase products and services that make it possible to innovate and produce. These policies will steadily improve the individual, and in doing so, improve society. Through savings, responsible borrowing, budgeting, and allocation, we can gain control over our monetary system. One cannot always control their income, but they can control their spending.
The national debt is a major problem. Almost 35 trillion. I think we're up to $34.7 trillion plus $1 trillion in interest. So the debt itself is not really a problem. If it's the interest that's the problem. So the debt just keeps growing. It's been growing for a couple hundred years, and the system hasn't collapsed yet.
Absolutely, the way money is structured today, it carries debt with every note that is printed by the central banks, like the Federal Reserve System and other central banks of just about every country on this planet. If you understand how central banks issue money and control the interest rates on the money, that type of absolute power over the way that money is injected into society essentially acts as a system of debt on people's earned resources. I think money as issued by governments and central banks with the debt system that is attached to it has always been one of the main mechanisms to fund wars of aggression. This is one of the ways that the powers that be want to waste people's resources so that they keep them in that artificial scarcity-based mindset.
What you could argue that if all money is created as debt, or it's created by banks as credit or debt, then on your books, you've got the money out there that we're all spending on one side of the books. Well, there's got to be a debt that balances it on the other side. So in that sense, it doesn't hurt if the debt is over there. The problem, again, is the interest.
Well, it depends upon what you mean by solution to the national debt. The obvious outcome is collapse. There's no way they can pay $35 trillion to liquidate that debt. Where would they get it? Where would the Treasury get $35 trillion? Could they liquidate all of the property that the United States owns against government property? Could they seize by taxation all of the property that private citizens own? Where is this $35 trillion to come from? That's the first question. Now, what they will probably do is roll over the debt, right? As one debt obligation matures, they'll finance it with another debt obligation. So that theoretically, the debt is never paid, it's just rolling it over. They're paying the interest probably, but they're rolling it over. But historically, what has that allowed them to do? Increase the debt. It wasn't always 35 trillion. It was much less than that. They've just added to it and added to it. There's no satisfactory solution. There's the cataclysmic solution. The cataclysmic solution is always there. It happens to all people who overspend. It's called bankruptcy.
Looking at the fractional reserve system, basically you're getting something out of nothing. I mean, if you have 1 ounce of gold and you're able to loan 9 against it, where do those 9 come from? They come from a fiction. They come from a bookkeeping entry, and that's cheating, that's stealing. And it's a privilege granted by government to private banks, and they have a monopoly on it. If you and I did that, we'd be in jail right now.
The people who are ultimately behind the money creation system that we have in our world are occultists. This is something that people have to really understand and come to terms with. The word occult simply means hidden. And what occultists often want to do is they want to overcomplicate matters. They want to obfuscate things. They want to make things more complicated in the minds of the people than they actually are, so that the public looks at it as an eternal mystery that can never really be understood, and they stop really trying to understand how it really works. But it really comes down to a very simple concept. When money is created, debt is attached to it that can never actually be paid back by the amount of money that is in circulation.
Debt can be a mechanism of control because it prevents you from doing what you really want to do. I know a case, for example, a young woman who worked for me for a while. She had 2 master's degrees and she was $200,000 in debt, and she couldn't get a job.
They don't really care about the principal. All they care about is the debt, because the interest has to be serviced. And with that, they have control, and that's what they want. So when you indebt a third world nation and you come in and you give them all this money to make their infrastructure better and build freeways and shopping centers and build the agricultural centers up and provide more water and dams, and all this stuff sounds great on the surface. But the people owning the money, the very savvy ones, know that the country can't pay that debt back.
When money is printed or issued by central banking cartels throughout the world, in whatever central bank of any nation in which they operate, debt is immediately attached to the issuance of that currency.
Well, this is a concern that I have, that the whole financial system throughout the world will collapse. We've never had the situation we have today where the entire world is running on fiat money, and that means pyramiding of debt and fractional reserve banking, controlled by special interests, bail out the rich and punish the poor. So there's a ton of debt, but there's a ton of malinvestment. And it's nice when it's going up and the bubble is being blown up and there seems to be prosperity, but it's all on borrowed money.
One of the enduring mysteries surrounding money lies in the creation of fiat currency. How is today's currency brought into existence? And how is it manipulated? Knowledge like this removes many of the obstacles created by an elite that relies on mystery. Clarity empowers, and with knowledge, fear is dissolved. Elites behind the banking curtain make the monetary system insanely complicated, so only they and their $500 per hour professionals can understand its machinations. And part of those machinations stem from the Federal Reserve's partnership with the U.S. Congress and Treasury.
For fiat currency's definition, you have to look to the word fiat, Latin verb let it be. That is, let this thing be money. It's money because some authority figure, institution, organization, perhaps a government, decrees that something will be used within its jurisdiction as money, even though typically the free market would not use it as money, or individuals generally would not recognize it as money or not want to use it as money. It's simply decreed to be money by some superior force, and the individual has to respond to that force with some form of obedience in terms of using that currency.
They realized they could issue their banknotes 10 times to the extent of their gold, and again, that was the beginning of the system we have now.
One of the most nefarious and giant scams on the planet is fiat money, where a few people, calling themselves the government, calling themselves the treasury, get to literally make up money out of nothing, as if we were playing Monopoly, and they got to make up money and we didn't. Well, that gives them the ability to just keep spending and spending. People would not be sending their children off to unnecessary imperialistic wars if they actually had to finance that themselves. But the politicians know that's not popular, so they go to the bankers and say, you know, print up a few trillion because we need to go get somebody's oil or somebody's territory or somebody's gold or something like that.
The banks can print and loan more money than they actually retain physically in possession. This is what's known as fractional reserve lending. And then what they do is they take, usually it's about a 1 to 9 ratio. So it's about 10% versus 90% that they don't have to have on deposit, somewhere around that number. And they can continue to lend out the money that they don't have to maintain on for immediate withdrawal to the public for more lending in which more debt is attached. So it's a compounding cycle of debt based on the way the money is issued and the way the money is kept in circulation or in banking institutions.
What happens? More money, chasing the same amount of goods, prices rise. Well, prices rise in different places at different rates. This is a very complicated system as this new money circulates through the economy. Eventually, it gets to some person whose income has not increased, but his prices have increased in the grocery store. So his personal welfare has decreased because he's paying more for the food he needs, but he's not getting more in his employment. And there's a real problem for the average person because he doesn't know how this is operating. All of a sudden he sees prices of goods going up in the grocery store, and he hears some politician telling him that we need price controls, and he doesn't understand it has nothing to do with the grocery store raising prices. It's these people way back in the chain of monetary generation that are responsible for this.
So with fake money, then the perpetrators can do all sorts of unpleasant, unhealthy actions on society which could not be pulled off, at least not for very long, if money was actually real, if it was created only in correlation to the value of work that was done or gold that was made available or real commodities, food and so forth that are backing the currency.
Young couple need to buy a house, but they don't have $100,000, obviously. I mean, they're just starting out. So they go to the bank and they say, we want to buy this house. We'll put up our mortgage. In other words, we agreed to pay you over 30 years for this house. And so the bank agrees to put $100,000 into their account. And that is the actual monetization of debt, where the couple is now in debt to the bank for the next 30 years, but they get the money. So it's turned into real money. What it basically is monetizing your future promise to repay. In other words, you don't have the money now, but you've agreed to pay it over time and pay the thing off. So a fiat currency is a currency because the government says so. In other words, it's legal tender. Everybody has to take it and pay for whatever they're trying to sell. But it's not actually backed by anything physical, like it's not backed by gold.
outlined in The Wizard of Oz, Frank Baum's book, about the Yellow Brick Road being basically the gold standard to the Emerald City. This idea that you on a monometallic standard leads to a fiat, fiat leads to destruction. There's never been a time in recorded history that we know of that the fiat system hasn't failed. And now, as we're doing this interview, we know that our days are numbered, and that means that we're either going to have a new system. Doesn't necessarily mean that gold will be in the mix, although it could be, or we're going to have a reset of some type.
The theft of money has happened throughout history, so the banking elite are very well trained in how to deceive the public to their trickery. When original silver and gold coins were first minted, this trickery was called coin clipping.
And that might involve actually cutting off a little piece of the coin at the edge, or perhaps filing it off. That would reduce the amount of gold or silver in the coin, and the person doing it would get a little bit of gold and silver. And if you did that on a large enough scale, a terrific amount of wealth could be transferred.
And that's why you see the perforated edges on gold coins and silver coins for the most part, because once you start digging into that, it's obvious. And that's why they're put there, so you couldn't cheat the system.
Now, fractional reserve banking systems basically work in the same way, because they increase the amount of currency in circulation beyond the amount of gold or silver or some real asset that the bank may hold or have title to.
Most people have said the word money billions of times probably in their lives, and they've never really even made the connection that the word money itself literally means one eye. It's a green language term, alchemically, occultically, for the one eye, the third eye. Literally, mon, meaning one in Latin, mono, and I, EY, again, the last E is not included, but this is why the word money is made to be the way that it is, because it actually is representing the spiritual sight of the individual. And it's the idea that this somehow represents spiritual power. This is what the money masters, this is what the occultists who ultimately control and issue money through the central banks want to equate money with. They want to equate it with that spiritual dynamic and discernment. But it is a false representation of that. It is a proxy. It is a false idol when it comes to that dynamic. We have to develop the true one eye and stop worshiping the false one.
In 2020, the global pandemic accelerated the discussion around agendas such as digital IDs and central bank digital currencies. While some of these initiatives faced resistance and setbacks, efforts to implement them continue in various forms today.
There were many totalitarian tendencies that arose during the COVID pandemic event. You had government stepping in and telling people that they couldn't assemble in various ways. They couldn't go to work or be out of their homes without masks. They had to socially distance. Children couldn't go to schools. People had to take untested vaccinations or vaccinations with untested pharmaceutical products, and on we went. Now, where did those powers emerge? These powers were simply asserted, basically out of nowhere, by governors in the states or by people in the bureaucracy, the pharmaceutical bureaucracy of the federal government, by President Trump. Operation Warp Speed, right? Get everyone vaccinated. Ultimately by what? By threats of one kind or another. If you didn't do it in the armed services, you could be discharged. If you didn't do it in your business, you could be fired. And on we went. Where did all of that come from? Exposed to various kinds of medical experiments, obviously without their consent. And coming out of that with the Nuremberg principle that you cannot, under any circumstances, as a government, require someone to engage in a medical experiment without the informed consent of that person, which would require first information and then consent. Well, the information was never there, so the consent couldn't have been there. So we look at a situation that arose that was in direct contradiction of one of the most horrific events of modern history. No one seemed to bat an eye about that.
We saw totalitarian tendencies express themselves in great abundance during the COVID pandemic. One of the ways that they implemented this type of totalitarian mindset is by getting businesses, corporations, and local government organizations and groups to implement their own control measures over the people that they have influence and sway over.
Now we really have stress, but if it's universal across the whole country, if everybody has the same stress at the same time, you're talking about major chaos, and there's no solution at all. People will be living in fear of their lives, fear of their livelihood, fear of their housing, fear of their health care, fear of their neighbors. If everybody's starving or they have no water to drink, they're worried about somebody showing up at their door with a pitchfork or a club or a gun or something. They want their water or their food.
If we really understand that authoritarianism and the desire to control other people is really a spiritual disease, it is not something that we should be aspiring to. It is not something that we should have any respect for. It is something that we should look at as an illness. It's a mental, psychological, and spiritual illness.
And that's a totalitarian imperative that you see in these so-called emergency situations. Someone declares an emergency as a governor, president, whatever, and then says, now I have powers which I wouldn't normally be able to exercise, but because of this emergency. And the question then becomes, well, wait a minute, you defined the emergency. So you created the powers. This is not something that's defined in the constitutional laws of the United States. This is a creation of your own. What's the limit to it?
So if people are afraid enough, they will accept any assault against their personal lives or their liberty. That's what we're talking about. It's not just not an issue of stress, oh my goodness, it's an emotional thing. No, it's a physical thing. It's a survival thing. It's the biggest thing in our entire lives, actually.
The banking mentality is one of control over human beings. We have to look at the world bankers, the financial elitists, as human farmers. They are farming nations as a farmer would farm animals literally on a standard farm. And that is the banking mentality. The banking mentality is that people are essentially animal to be herded and controlled. And they see themselves as the masters of our world and reality, and they see human beings as their slaves. They see human beings as animals to be farmed and controlled.
Because out of fear comes mild and passive acceptance of any solution that the politicians want to offer.
Agenda 21 is a group of goals that the United Nations and other think tanks that are based in globalization have set forward as a series of guidelines that they want to impose upon all of humanity. They want to control human beings' energy usage. They want to control technology. They want to control farming. They want to control all of the ways that people interact with energy and energy systems. We have to see Agenda 21 as a complete control over humanity through complete control over the way humanity uses energy.
Through the push of their agendas, financial elites do not experience stress, fear, or the control of money in the same way you and I do. As F. Scott Fitzgerald put it, the very rich are different from you and me. The very rich are often the cause of stress, fear, and control. They are usually not the effect of it.
Nothing seems to change because the people who have the money want to maintain the status quo. It's through the money that they have the power, and they want to retain the power. And they get that by, they have lobbyists who can pass bills that allow them to preserve their interests, or that they can oppose bills that will cut into their interests. So politics is a serious problem. We do need to change our political system in some way and get it out of the control of big money.
The very rich have no incentive to change. Their modus operandi is to conserve their power. Again, they generate a popular illusion of change, a progressivism, but they put the boots on and never walk. Given this, it's no wonder the only way populations have been able to cause change is revolutions. But is war the only thing that can motivate change?
Cryptocurrency was invented by its creator or creators as a mechanism of not having to depend on and use the central banking cartels for currency. And its original vision was everyone would be their own monetary institution. We wouldn't have to rely on not only central banks, but even some of the banks that are set up as too big to fail. And we would have a more pure form of monetary exchange because it would be private, decentralized, and non-inflationary in its nature. But what happened long-term was the same selfish, egotistical mentalities came into the cryptocurrency ecosystem. And instead of Goldman Sachs and Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase, we now have the new central bank, so-called, in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. And those are the big exchanges like Binance and Bitcoin and Bitfinex and many others. The exchange system in the cryptocurrency ecosystem was never in the white paper of the original cryptocurrency Bitcoin. These are constructs of a form of consciousness that prevailed in the older monetary system and unfortunately were brought right into the new one. So the new central banks now reign in the crypto space, and those are the big exchanges.
But when you have some situation like Silicon Valley Bank a year ago when it went bankrupt, or there were 3 banks, big banks that went bankrupt, that were actually crypto banks, and that was the reason. Silicon Valley Bank, there was a massive coordinated attack by the short sellers on Silicon Valley Bank. So it was an attack on the stock, brought down the stock, and the depositors got wind of it, and then it circulated in social media. Of course, social media now is instantaneous, so everybody heard of it. This bank is in trouble, get your money out. In the space of 3 days, 85% of the depositors attempted to pull their money out.
But a bimetallic standard actually works the best. But the problem with the bimetallic standard that we've seen in the past is that man dictates what the correct ratio is between gold and silver. When Sir Isaac Newton became the main banker for the Bank of England, and he put them back on a gold standard, and he more or less looked out the window and said, well, the going rate is 15.5 ounces of silver equals 1 ounce of gold, and mandated that it was at that price always and everywhere. And it isn't true because markets fluctuate. So sometimes it could be 16, sometimes it could be 15, sometimes it could be 15 and a half. So if you allow the market or the free market to establish the ratio, then you have a pretty well-worked monetary standard that has both gold and silver.
Money is just a representation of energy, and energy is boundless. So imagine if we had access to energy the way we have access to air.
I think what Tesla had envisioned for the planet is a system of energy distribution whereby energy could be transferred from any point on the planet to any other point on the planet using Earth as the distributor.
Tesla really had the ability to show us that he could get energy out of the Earth, where he basically took light bulbs and stuck them into the ground, and using what we'll call free energy, he was able to light these light bulbs up. So many have stated that his purpose was to provide free energy to the world.
Seen as very, very dangerous and undesirable by the powers that be during Tesla's time, and still is today in our current time, because they would not be able to control, meter, and distribute energy in a way that makes people think of it as scarce.
I'm tremendously excited right now by the emergence of technologies for accessing energy which are in a whole new paradigm. The old paradigm is we've got to break nature in order to get the energy out. So we burn it, or we crash it together, we fuse it, we fizz it, we explode it, something, and the prize is energy. Well, that's very dangerous. We've taken that about as far as we can without blowing ourselves up. So what's the alternative to that? Well, it's noticing how does nature work. And the way nature works is every sustainable energy system, as far as I can tell after a lifetime of research, in the universe is a donut-shaped whirlpool, whether it's a human being or an atom or a solar system or a galaxy. This shape, if you want a sustainable energy system. So then our challenge is, how can we dance with that shape? And if you get that dance right, if you get the right materials in the right shape and vibrate it or rotate it at the right frequencies, what happens is it goes into harmonic resonance with the field of energy that we're all a part of. We're not living in an empty space. Even so-called empty space has now been shown by John Wheeler and other physicists to have virtually infinite energy at every point. So our challenge as humanity is, how can we access that energy harmoniously?
There is sort of a spiritual aspect to money. So it's all life, it runs on sunlight, of course. So the plants use photosynthesis to turn the sunlight into something that we can eat, and we turn that into energy, and then we breathe out carbon dioxide, the plants breathe it in. So it's an ecosystem. Well, human life is the same way, where we are social animals, we're collective. In the ancient Sumerian text, it said that the gods gave us language and thought in order that we could communicate with each other, so we can work together, and thought to figure things out. And I think the Greeks said the same thing. Greek mythology said that the gods forgot to give us anything to survive with. Like we don't have fangs, we don't have big muscles, that sort of thing. We don't have claws yet. So they gave us ingenuity instead. So it's the same thing, thought and language, so that we could work together and work out these problems.
One of my favorite films is called I Am, and it really puts the onus of what's wrong in the world is like, I am part of the problem. I am also part of the solution. And the idea is that, unless we are our best selves, so to speak, then really it starts with us. So we really need to be interactive with, as it says at the Oracle of Delphi, to thine own self be true. If you're really solid, grounded, and a full human being participating in, the art of living, you have an ability to basically live a really wondrous life. And this is available to everybody. It's just that we're not taught how to do it. So in the film I Am, it's about a director that directed one of Jim Carrey's earliest movie, and he's in his brand new mansion. I think he has his second private jet, might be his first, but he's got everything you can imagine as far as what we are taught success to be. And he's empty. He's in this mansion, he's got all this stuff, but he doesn't feel fulfilled. And so it explores that, and he starts exploring his own path and starts looking at this and saying to himself, it's not about the stuff I have. That's not fulfilling me. So he goes to his dad, who's an MD, I think he was at the Mayo Clinic. Regardless, very wise man. And he starts to give him a bit of the philosophy, which he probably already knew, but it really hadn't sunk in. So he started looking for meaning in his life. And what he found is, as long as his needs were met, he's pretty happy. He started bicycling to work. He got a place that was much downsized from the mansion. And then he started looking at the history of this idea of avarice, or you never have enough, or whatever. And that came up in this documentary. And it fascinated me, being a student of monetary history, that in the 30s, the average person thought that people had to display their wealth and could never get enough, were actually having mental illness.
I think the ideal monetary system is one which is determined by the people who have freedom to choose among many, many different types of money, and let the free market decide which one is the best. That would be my overview of the best money. One that is determined by competition, not by decree by the government saying, we will issue this kind of money. It'll be digital, or no, it'll be gold. No, it'll be silver. No, it'll be credit card. It'll be partly digital, but it'll be backed by a basket of currencies or some, all these different things that the experts will offer, and nobody knows what they're talking about in most cases. Let the people decide from actual use. That means we have to get rid of the laws, the laws that require us to use a certain money, Like we got to use the government's money because it's law. You go to prison if you refuse to accept it. If you have a good monetary system, you don't have to have a law forcing people to take it. They'll be lined up at your door. That's the reason they have the laws, because they know that the system itself will not stand the competition of a free market. So back to the original statement, in my view, the best monetary system is one where there are lots of options and let the people decide and let the free market be supreme.
Your change, your purpose, your meaning, that's what has the real power. But yet we're taught constantly that it's not what you have internally, it's what you have externally, which makes us successful, which is what I call the big lie.
If people are in a state of fear, they are in a long-term state of confusion. If they're in a state of confusion, they don't really know the solution. They don't understand how they should think and behave if they're confused. And the occultists want that. The dominators want that. The social engineers want that result, because a people in a state of fear and confusion are always looking to externalize their power and give up their personal responsibility to someone who says, I'll take care of it.
The ideal monetary system would be one that distributes resources equitably and efficiently. And so I think actually that banks are not a bad thing, and even banks creating our money in the form of credit. What they really are doing is monetizing your future promise to repay. So you don't have the money to buy a house, the bank will turn that into something you can spend, and the bank will stand behind it and pay whoever you write your checks to, and they can do it because most people will leave their money in the bank, etc. I mean, I think that system's not bad, but what's bad about it is that it should be a public utility. Money and banks should be public utilities, meaning of the people, by the people, for the people. We the people should own the banks. We should be able to control. We should get the profits, and the credit should go into our local communities. The credit that comes from our state revenues, for example, should go into our local communities, stimulating our local communities, not going back to Wall Street or going back to big investors somewhere out of state that aren't helping us.
A lot of billionaires think that they have to conquer other people to win, that it has to be a huge win for them and a loss for other people, a loss for everyone else. And it doesn't really have to be like that. We can have win-win situations if we ultimately behave in a moral capacity. This has been known as a non-zero sum game by many researchers and people who analyze this dynamic. Again, there doesn't have to be winners and losers. That's a mentality that currently reigns in our society. We could definitely have win-win situations if we move from a purely left brain, almost satanic mindset of I have to come out on top and everybody else has to lose. If we move from a mentality like that to a mentality that we can be cooperative as a species and ultimately all end up winning. That is the mindset and the philosophy that we have to move toward. What stress really is human beings' desire and continuation of doing a behavior that is out of harmony with nature. That is the ultimate source of what stress is. And what generates more and more of it is humanity's mental attachment to distorted thought forms that aren't in harmony with nature, and making themselves continue to do things that push them further and further out of alignment with nature. That's what stress really is from an esoteric point of view. What I would say is the ultimate solution is raising human consciousness to the point where it understands the techniques of the controllers, it understands the techniques of the social engineers, of the money masters of the world, and does not fall for those illusionary tricks of the mind any longer.
Society is shrugging off this exoskeleton of fraud and deception and coercion. And what we need to replace it with now for the first time is we need to have healthy, voluntary, sustainable, natural solutions to every single sector. We need to have those on the table as the evolution happens, as this exoskeleton of psychopathic control collapses, which it's already doing. We need to, for the first time, already have the organic polyculture farming. We need to have the homeschooling, which is already going on. We need to have a free market in currencies. And I could go on and on in every sector. This is what my work has been about. And I'm seeing that we already do have those healthy solutions in every sector, and they're growing rapidly. Some people call it exit the system and build the new system. We need to have those all on the table when the collapse or the revolution comes. And if we can do that, for the first time, we can actually change the paradigm into a harmonious, accurate one, and we can do it nonviolently.
It all comes down to who has the power, and we have these very few at the top, this billionaire class that has all the power, but we're the ones that gave it to them. You know, as we've talked about, you know, other places, I mean, we have the power because even though they on an individual basis have so much more than the average person on the globe, nonetheless, collectively, we still have a lot of power. So, you know, again, if we buy the right things or vote with our money, we actually have a great deal more control than we think we do.
See, what we have to really understand from a deep philosophical moral perspective is that the very idea of authority is actually slavery. If you have authority over others, then those beings technically are slaves, and the one with the authority is acting in the capacity of a master over slaves. That situation is always inherently immoral. It is based in violence. If you don't comply, something violent will be done unto you to make you comply.
There aren't a whole lot of examples in history of people behaving as people should, because mostly they behaved as packs and they go to war with each other, and then they get a king and the king kills half of them and then he gets overthrown, and they play these stupid political games. And I think we're only really just waking up as humans instead of just the species that looks like us, of getting to the point where we realize, the way I sum it up is, I own me and you own you. And if people can just grasp that and stop robbing each other, stop bossing each other around, stop imagining that any pseudo-religious political ritual can give me the right to take your stuff or to boss you around or control your life or do anything to you other than, if you attack me, I can defend myself, and vice versa. Because people are only just waking up to that, there aren't many examples of it, because there aren't many cultures or civilizations or people who have actually thought of, how about if we treat each other as equals, as if nobody is anybody's master and nobody is anybody's slave. And it really is, you know, it sounds like it should be obvious, but that is a drastically new concept to most of the world, and I think we're only just beginning to be what human beings are supposed to be.
The universe is full of infinite energy at virtually every point, and we are a part of that. We are a temporary vortex accessing that infinite energy, and that energy is all one. Then we are individual drops in that ocean, but we're also oceans in the drop. So as we figure out how to honor our distinctness at the same time as we honor our unification with the entire field of life energy, as we reflect that in our relationships with other people, with doing business, with doing self-governance, and especially in how we create money as a healthy, honest tool to serve ourselves, I think that's when creativity gets unleashed to allow us to go beyond what we can even imagine in terms of the peace, the security, the success, the prosperity of humanity living on a healthy planet. And when we do that, I think we'll then be recognized by other sentient beings in the cosmos as a species which has, by definition, gotten through that risky self-destruction phase, actually learned to live in harmony with life energy. And then we can join in the cosmic family, living and loving and thriving.
What I have proposed is competing currencies. And the states could do this. The states have the power to make gold and silver coin or tender in payment of debts. That's a constitutionally reserved power of the states. So the states could set up a gold and silver depository. They could pass statutes saying that the gold and silver in this depository will be used as legal tender within our state, commercial transactions, taxation, so private sector, public sector transactions. And we will have a unit that might be whatever, the Troy grain, let's say, a physical unit of gold and silver. And it will be computerized so we can make transactions in a millionth of a grain, a billionth of a grain, and so forth. For the first time in history, we can have a gold and silver system that actually functions, because in the past you had gold and silver coins and there were only certain sizes. What did you do in between? That created difficulty. That led to things called token coinage. It led to things called bank currency, right? Because you only had coins of certain sizes and you had transactions of different values. The computers today can handle any transaction you want to imagine. So now we can have bread being sold in gold or in silver, right? Because we can have extremely small amounts of gold in computer transactions. The gold never leaves the depository. It just changes hands on the accounting books, right? My gold becomes your gold, or your silver becomes my silver, depending on the transactions that occur. We never even touch the gold. So the states could do this, and they would then have a stable basis for state taxation and spending, and they would then create a stable basis for people to make transactions within the private economy, which would, of course, be tied into the state taxation system and tied into the state expenditure system. So the whole thing could be made to run on a gold and silver basis.
If you look at precious metals or real money, it's a store of energy, basically. I mean, it takes labor to dig into the earth, find a gold deposit, and take that gold, take it to the surface, purify it, refine it, and melt it into a bar or a coin. So it's got energy into the equation, same with silver. And so that's actually stored energy value. There's a reality in that coin or in that bar. And that's real. And the idea is that that real thing can be trusted. And the whole system is based on trust.
Well, gold and silver and real backed paper money is reliable. You know, you can cash it in and get its real value out. And it's accessible to everyone. There's no one has more of an advantage over it than anyone else. So it becomes a useful and honest tool. So real money can't be made up out of nothing. Everyone has an equal right to access it. So it's actually the basis, it's the tool for honest, free market, voluntary exchanges.
You can bury your gold in the backyard, but you also need a community to rely on. And if you're lucky enough to live where you have land and you could raise your own crops and your own animals and make your own food and have something to trade with the other people in the community is very important. And community is that social organism that is a part of you, that you are not really satisfied unless you're part of that social entity anyway. And you could set up a community currency for trade which has often been done historically.
And the way to actually work in this world to your maximum ability is to be true to yourself, to be self-actualized or self-realized. And once you're at that point, then you could give your most love, because if you're really real with yourself, you know truly who you are, what you're about, what your purpose is, and why you're here, then obviously you will give out the most maximum amount of love. But if you're unsure of what your purpose is, who you are, what you're doing, and you're a different chameleon for, you know, I'm this kind of person at the chess club, and this kind of person at the bar, and this kind of person when I'm driving the car, this kind of person when I'm sitting in the university, you're mixed up. You're not really your true self, and it's the authenticity that's really important.
We need to, in my opinion, not sanctify or demonize money, but to realize that it's the human being who is using the money and the system by which money is able to be used that determines, okay, is this going to benefit the thriving of all life on planet Earth, or is this going to undermine it?
If the whole financial system implodes, millions will run to gold and silver, especially silver because gold will be so high, few will be able to afford even an ounce. High-tech money like cryptocurrencies may look promising, but remember, gold and silver have served humankind for thousands of years. New is not always better. Through an application of the knowledge presented in this film, we can mitigate the stress of the money by understanding how this monetary system works. True freedom from the stress, fear, and control of money can only be realized when we align ourselves with the abundant energy of life, with the infinite force of the universe flowing through us. When we unite in purpose to uphold our God-given natural rights, this energy becomes unstoppable. Through this alignment, we will create a brighter future, a silver sunrise, that will illuminate humanity for all time.
You've just seen how the monetary system we live under was built, and why it cannot last. History tells us the same story again and again. When money is corrupted, freedom dies. But when money is honest, when it is tied to real value, humanity rises. Silver Sunrise isn't just a documentary, it's a call to action. Each of us has a role to play in choosing truth over lies, sound money over fiat promises, freedom over control. I believe the torch of freedom still burns, and if enough of us stand together, we can pass it on brighter than ever. The future is not written by central banks or politicians. It's written by people who refuse to bow, people like you. Thank you for joining us, and may your silver sunrise be the dawn of a freer, sounder, and more honest tomorrow.
Freedom dies when money lies, cuts us down, blinds our eyes, but hearts still burn where the truth survives. The torch of freedom's still alive. We won't bow, we won't disguise, cause freedom lives where money is wise. See, the price is on the rise, dreams dissolve before our eyes. Silent taxes steal the years, trade your hope for debt and fears. It's the tyrant's oldest game, keep the people weak, keep the blame. Too tired to fight, too numb to see, forgetting they were born free. Freedom dies when money lies, cuts us down, blinds our eyes, but hearts still burn where the truth survives. The torch of freedom's still alive. We won't bow, we won't disguise, cause freedom lives where money is wise. See, the price is on the rise, dreams dissolve before our eyes. Silent taxes steal the years, trade your hope for debt and fears. It's the tyrant's oldest game, keep the people weak, keep the blame. Too tired to fight, too numb to see, forgetting they were born free. Freedom dies when money lies, cuts us down, blinds our eyes, but hearts still burn where the truth survives. The torch of freedom's still alive. We won't bow, we won't disguise, cause freedom lives where money is wise. This is the reckoning, this is the call. Every empire hits the wall. Do we bow or do we rise? Do we fight for truth or choke on lies? Gold and silver, solid ground, strength the tyrants can't tear down. No swords of steel, no empty zeal, just the will to choose what's real. Freedom dies when money lies, but we are the ones who turn the tide. Raise the torch, let the night ignite, for our children's hope, for their lives. We won't bow, we won't disguise, 'cause freedom lives where money is wise. When money lies, freedom dies, but when money's sound, humanity will rise.